Between 3000 and 2850 BC, southern Mesopotamia was a patchwork of walled city-states. The Sumerians living there had already developed advanced agriculture and, crucially, invented writing. But what they did not have was a concept of a unified central government. Cities like Kish, Uruk, and operated independently and fought each other constantly for regional dominance. This endless, localized warfare steadily drained their resources and left their military forces exhausted. Meanwhile, a nomadic people of Semitic origin, the Akkadians, were migrating out of the Arabian Peninsula and settling along the desert margins of the Euphrates River. Initially working in Sumerian gardens or serving as mercenary soldiers, their population steadily grew, sparking a deep exchange of art, architecture, and language between the two groups. You have an aging, divided civilization spending its power on internal conflicts, situated right next to a growing, dynamic immigrant population. It was a volatile power vacuum waiting to be exploited. The spark came when Lugal-Zagassi, a Sumerian king, tried to forcefully conquer the region. The ruler of Kish, terrified of this threat, promoted a young Akkadian winemaker named Sargon to command his forces. Sargon proved to be a brilliant tactician. He defeated Lugal-Zagassi, marched his army all the way to the Persian Gulf, and established his own kingdom. To hold these newly conquered lands, Sargon threw out the old playbook. Instead of relying on temporary, localized city militias, he created humanity's first permanent standing army. He kept a highly trained force of 5,400 loyal soldiers by his side at all times, based out of his new capital city, Akkad. Then he overhauled the government. Sargon stripped political power away from the old local dynasties and installed his own hand-picked governors. Everyone answered directly to him. But Sargon was pragmatic. He didn't try to erase the people he conquered. He actively preserved the Sumerian language in his daily administration, built temples, and offered thousands of sacrifices to honor their traditional gods. By combining a loyal, permanent military with direct administrative oversight and a healthy respect for local culture, Sargon turned a region of warring tribes into a unified geopolitical machine. He built the first true empire. With a permanent army at his disposal, Sargon quickly realized he could use his military to secure something even more valuable than territory: supply lines. He began building a massive, protected trade network. He marched his forces east toward Elam. After defeating their major cities, he established non-aggression pacts that guaranteed Akkad a steady monopoly on precious stones and metals flowing from the region. Looking south, Sargon extended his reach to capture the highly profitable caravan routes. The immense wealth coming from as far away as the Indus River Valley was now funneled directly into Akkadian hands. He then pushed his army west, marching into northern Syria. By conquering the tribes along the upper Euphrates and Tigris, he secured the Taurus and Amanos mountains, allowing him to harvest massive quantities of highly sought-after silver and cedar trees. The Akkadian Empire was operating as a highly efficient economic engine. Sargon used his centralized military to extract resources from the distant edges of the known world and pull all that wealth back into a single, enriched capital.
But hyper-centralized systems are fragile. The moment Sargon died after a 56-year reign, the empire immediately began to fracture. His sons spent decades fighting off massive provincial rebellions just to keep the state from tearing itself apart. Stability only returned around 2260 BC under Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin. He pushed the empire's borders out to their absolute zenith in Canaan. He aggressively expanded the military to 90,000 men, brutally crushing internal revolts. Blinded by ego, Naram-Sin declared himself a living, immortal god, wearing a horned helmet previously reserved strictly for the gods. To assert his absolute supremacy, he committed a massive political error. He destroyed the sacred temple of Enlil in the Sumerian city of Nippur, instantly shattering the delicate cultural harmony his grandfather had spent a lifetime building. Naram-Sin completely misunderstood how his own empire worked. He threw away the careful balance of integration that held the state together, replacing it with the sheer, alienating force of his own arrogance. Just as Naram-Sin reached the peak of his power, he was hit by a force his army couldn't fight. a sudden, severe, and geographically widespread shift in the climate struck Mesopotamia. The immediate result was devastating. Without reliable water, crops failed entirely across the region, triggering a prolonged and catastrophic famine. The highly centralized agricultural supply lines that fed the capital completely broke down. Naram-Sin suddenly found himself with a 90,000-man standing army that he could no longer feed, rapidly draining his manpower and military leverage. As thousands died from hunger and thirst, the desperate public looked for someone to blame. They pointed directly at Naram-Sin's ego and his destruction of the Enlil temple, birthing the enduring myth that the famine was a divine punishment, known as Akkad's curse. It exposed the ultimate vulnerability of hyper-centralized systems. When you rely on a single, highly integrated network, a failure in the core environmental inputs means the entire geopolitical machine starves simultaneously. With the central government weakened and starving, the Akkad administration lost its grip. The subjugated territories on the periphery saw their opportunity and violently rose up to reclaim their independence. The internal fractures tore the state apart. The Elamites broke away in the east, while the Sumerians successfully revolted in the south. This southern uprising paved the way for the mighty Third dynasty to rise and assert its own architectural and political dominance. But the final blow came from the outside. A mysterious mountain people known as the Gutians descended from the highlands of the Zagros Mountains. They swept down into Mesopotamia, crushing the remnants of the weakened Akkadian homeland. After decades of turmoil, the last few Akkadian kings were left impoverished, holding on to a destroyed, headless state. By 2150 BC, humanity's first empire was completely erased from the map. The rise and fall of Akkad leaves us with a stark historical truth. Unified armies and strategic trade routes can allow you to conquer the world, but no amount of military might, administrative genius, or divine arrogance can survive the catastrophic forces of a changing climate.